What was some of the work here that you did at Musa Capital?
Some of the work that I did here was I was focusing largely on research, right? And I did some research based on foreign banks, right? Whom Musa had invested in, and whom we were trying to establish the different kinds of growth that those banks have shown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the second thing that I worked on was focused largely on the private equity industry. And that was the second thing I worked on. Right?
Okay. So the banks that you were researching are banks that presumably Musa had made investments in the past, and the idea was to establish what the impact of those investments had done. What did you see? What did you find?
Well, what I found out was that, okay, this was an extensive research because it was not based on South African banks per se. Instead, it was mostly foreign banks. Understand? And what I found out was that during the periods that the bank had been established and coming to the time that Musa Capital had, how do I say this, had pulled out, if you will, from such banks. Understand? I saw that there was a difference, as you will, but it's a business world. You understand that if you establish a business, then ultimately there's growth. Mm-hmm. So I was comparing that from the time that Musa had invested in such a company to the time that Musa had now pumped up the fuel for that company. What had happened in the recent years?
And so, what's your personal analysis? Was it good, bad, indifferent? Did it matter? Did it not matter? Were they better off? Were they not better off?
Well, I think it was significant. Let me put it like that. I wouldn't say that if you invest in something, then ultimately you are the one who did everything for you. You understand? But then I would say it was significant. It made a difference towards what they were achieving. Ultimately, they were the one who started it.
Now, most of you said foreign. Were they U.S. based? Were they UK based? These banks.
It was African based banks.
I got you. Now, what do you think about any lessons there, any opportunities there in terms of the research you did of how to apply what was learned in some of those other African countries, how to apply that to the banking and financial services environment in South Africa?
Well, I think when looking at investing in South Africa, you have to look at policies that regulate investing in South Africa. They vary largely from those of African states, understand? So South Africa is, as one would say, a bit more restrictive than African states, understand? But then not to take away that South Africa is a good investing field. But then I would say that if you were to invest in a South African bank, then you would really have to make a well thought of decision.
What's your personal opinion? Why aren't there more indigenous-owned banks owned by Black Africans in South Africa?
Well, that would have to take us back to the ages, understand, the ages of oppression and everything. But then, why most Black people are not in power, as you would put it, in owning having black owned banks, understand? I would say it's largely based on, let's say, empowerment. Understand? It's not that every Black kid out there knows everything about business. Understand? Business was not what we were supposed to learn. Understand? But then that should not be an excuse. Understand? Sometimes Black people would say, "Listen, I am Black. I'm supposed to work and not actually employ." Understand? Sometimes it goes back to the mentality of the person. They say, "Listen, this is what I think, but this is what it should. I'm supposed to work. I'm not supposed to."
Not supposed to be an owner.
Yeah.
So, is there a role from what you've been at Musa now for how long?
I've been here for a month and a half. Yeah.
It seems long because you work long hours.
It seems like 2 to 3 months.
You're right.
Yeah.
What's the role you think on this issue around ownership, changing mentality of indigenous Black-owned banks in South Africa? Is there a role for private equity to play for a fund manager like Musa to help do what it's done in other countries? What should we be doing to try to make that happen here?
Well, I think the most significant thing is that as Musa, you're based in South Africa. I'm not saying that you should actually focus in South Africa, but I'm saying if you're gonna start somewhere, why not start at home? Understand? I based on my research, I've seen that Musa has done significant changes in the South African equity industry. But then I'm saying, listen, if if you wanna spread out, why do you branch out but not start here at home? You understand? I've seen okay fine, I've seen some changes and I've seen, you know, some investment funds and everything like that. But then, you know, for Musa can do more. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm thinking that Musa can do more domestically and internationally.
You're challenging us, huh?
I'm checking. Well, let's not say it's a challenge. Let's say it's an obligation.
Oh, even better.
Obligation.
Even better. Well done.
That's
We
it.
could go. We could have this conversation for another 3 hours.